We're about to start our third trip down the ICW, and we thought we'd take this trip south as an opportunity to help others who may be planning their own ICW trip. We'll be putting together a series of videos over the next few weeks that can act as a cruising guide of sorts for others who are looking for more information about the ICW before they do their own trip.
We plan to break the ICW into small chunks and talk about each area's individual characteristics, including great places to stop and explore, traditional shoaling spots, high current areas, and some bridges you may need the time. In this first video, we wanted to go over some of the basic navigation and equipment we found useful on the ICW. Please note, this is not a navigation course.
Yeah, you definitely should already know the rules of the road. That's not something we're going to be teaching here, just more kind of specifics to the ICW itself. We want to start with a slight difference to the rules of the road as it pertains to the ICW, and that is the rule of red right return. It doesn't really work on the ICW because you are regularly coming towards and going away from inlets. It really only works if you are coming in or out of the ICW via the ocean. So instead, on the ICW, they use these little golden triangles and squares, and those are what you will use to be able to identify ATONS, or aids to navigation, that are specific to the ICW. So at the very top, you'll see a little triangle or a little square, and you'll know that that is an ICW marker and is one you want to pay attention to, versus there may be many, many other markers, especially in some of the bigger sounds, that are more there for commercial traffic heading in and out of the sound as you might be crossing it. The triangles will be on the shore side or the mainland side of the channel, and the squares will always be on the ocean side of the channel. So as you're heading southbound, that will mean that you'll keep triangles to your starboard and squares to your port. But if you're coming northbound, it will be the opposite. Most of the time, it does line up that the triangles are on the reds and the squares are on the greens, just like you would expect them to be. But there are some places where it's reversed. So always use the gold if you're following the ICW.
Now to the fun part, charts. We use electronic charts for our ICW trips. The biggest plus for an electronic chart is that it's going to be up to date and it's really easy to update it. With the ICW, things are changing all the time, shoaling, things like that. New buoys being moved. So really, paper charts are pretty much obsolete from the day they're printed. We use two navigation apps, Navionics and Aquamaps.
If you're only going to use one, we would recommend Aquamaps, mostly because they have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers surveys that you can overlay onto the traditional charts. These surveys are typically some of the most up-to-date data that you can get, and it's really beautifully color-coded, and they regularly survey those traditional shoaling areas on a very regular basis. Aquamaps also allows you to see both the waterway guides alerts and active captain as well. So you can see both of those. Waterway guide alerts are extremely helpful on the ICW, mostly because they are kept up to date by the waterway guides team. So they're not fully dependent on crowdsourcing like active captain is. Active captain is just the general public, when they feel like it, adding information. But the waterway guide alerts are updated on a very regular basis by a team of individuals that Waterway Guides has, not necessarily, I don't know if they're employed, but that's part of their role with Waterway Guides, is to update those alerts on the charts. And they are usually very up to date and very accurate as to what's going on, including sometimes like where a dredge is located, or if a shoaling has been updated but the Army Corps of Engineers survey hasn't been updated yet. Those will all be in those waterway guides. A few other notable features for Aquamaps is, one, it is super easy to find your local tide station. There's a really nice search feature for that. And it will also tell you at any given time, as long as you are within, I think it's a quarter mile of the ICW, it will tell you what mile you're at. And because most cruising guides and most like active captain and waterway guide alerts are specific to a particular mile marker, you'll be able to know how close you are to that mile marker at any given time, which is very useful.
On our first 2 trips down the ICW, we use Aquamaps and Navionics side by side. Right now, for us, we don't think that's necessary. It's very easy to have one set up side by side, like one on an iPad, one on a smartphone, or if you got like one of those fancy iPad Pros, you can do both on the same thing.
It is really helpful to have them side by side, especially as you're getting to know the ICW and where those spots are. And if you're nervous at all, it kind of helps you be able to compare the two to make sure that, hey, that does look like the deepest water.
Navionics has one feature that kind of sets it apart from the rest, and that is the sonar charts. And that is user-generated depth data. So as a boat running Navionics or has a Garmin chart plotter goes over an area, it records the depth and then eventually sends it back to Navionics and Garmin, the same company. And then they create these pretty accurate charts, very accurate, highly detailed charts of the bottom using all this user-generated data. But there is one shortcoming you need to be aware of. While this user-generated data is great, you kind of have to understand how it works. So if no boats are going over a certain spot, the depth is not going to be updated. So if something got shouldered in very quickly, like Lockwood's Follies, Navionics shows it's pretty deep over there, like 6-7 feet. But if you look at it with your eyes, it's dry land and the buoy is like on the ground.
True story.
Since no one's going over it, it's not getting updated, not being sent back to Navionics, and nothing's being changed. But the other spot is on the rock pile in North Carolina. It shows it's deep all the way across because nobody goes on the edges because there's massive rocks over there. So that's just one of the other things you need to keep in mind. But all in all, it's a great tool.
It also works the other way, where if an area has been very recently dredged, it won't update to that either if people haven't gone over the newly dredged area. So just keep in mind, it's a great tool, but it's a little imperfect.
AIS is another tool. While it's not required, it's really nice to have. It allows other, especially commercial ships in these big sounds and port areas you go through, to know your name, speed, and your direction of travel. So they can make informed decisions about where you're going and what your intentions are. And the other thing that's kind of nice is that when you're traveling down the ICW and somebody wants to hail you, and if they have AIS, they can see your name and they can hail you by name instead of sailboat by marker 56.
Yeah, it also allows you to see the big commercial traffic before you can see it. There are some areas where you're kind of entering in a blind spot, like Savannah River, where if you don't have AIS, you kind of have to inch your way out and look both ways like you're crossing a road because it's pretty blind until you're almost in the shipping channel. So having AIS allows you to kind of look upriver a little bit farther and look downriver a little bit farther. It's not 100% necessary, but we definitely think it's helpful. If you don't have AIS, another way to do this is to use marinetraffic.com. It's not as accurate, but it will give you a general idea in most of those major ports like Charleston and Norfolk and Savannah, what the traffic looks like on the rivers and in the ports. Weather.
Your favorite subject?
My favorite subject. Now, most of the ICW is pretty well protected. That's why a lot of us use it, because you don't have to wait for a nice weather window to go outside into the ocean. There's only a few spots where weather's really important, and we'll talk about those as we get to each section where those areas might be. So just kind of having a general idea of what you may expect in terms of weather is a good idea. We'll give you what we use, but there are a zillion weather apps out there. You're going to find what works best for you, but we'll talk about the apps that we use on our boat. We subscribe to a couple of apps that you may not need if you're just planning on doing the ICW, because we do go offshore on a semi-regular basis. So we do have a few subscription services that you may not need, but we'll just go through what we currently use.
First one we use is the NOAA Marine Forecast. They provide forecasts for the entire United States and its territories, broken down by region. And the regions are probably 25 miles long. So they're a little
bit longer than that, but
so in some places they could be pretty small, and some areas, the regions are pretty large.
They do a really good job with wave forecasts. I think they probably do the best job with wave forecasts of any of the options that we use. It's what we use them primarily for. Their wind forecasts are typically on the lower end of what you will actually see. For radar, we use the My Radar app. It's always a good idea to have some sort of access to weather radar while you're on a boat, especially if you have cell service, just to keep an eye for thunderstorms and squalls. The beauty of the My Radar app is that it has a lot of additional layers you can add to the radar to just see more information. They will overlay any of the National Weather Service alerts or any of the National Weather Service severe weather prediction areas. They will overlay that directly onto the map for you, so you can see in the morning, hey, we're in a slight risk for severe thunderstorms today. We might want to change our plans based on that. It also does a really good job of giving you information about letting you know that there's a lightning strike nearby. If you turn on their notifications, it'll give you good information about, hey, it's going to start raining in about 20 minutes, or there's been a lightning strike in your area. And then you kind of know maybe we really need to start seeking shelter. I personally love it. It also has a cloud overlay, which is great for fog. There's so many awesome options in there, and it is completely free.
We also use Windy. Windy allows you to get data from multiple weather models and have it all in one screen on one app. So you could see what the NOAA, what the National Weather Service is predicting, what the Euro is predicting, what the ICON.
Yeah,
there's like 12 or 10 of them.
There's so many of them.
And you can kind of get an idea that, hey, tomorrow there's pretty good consensus between all the models. So that's good.
Yeah.
Or if they're all over the place, probably not a good sign.
Yeah, especially if you're northbound in the spring. We paid really, really close attention to Windy in the spring. If you're seeing big spikes on a lot of different models and they are not lining up, most likely you're going to see a pretty squally thunderstormy day. And we just chose basically when we were seeing those days to just hold tight and not move. In the spring, you'll see a lot more of this than you do in the fall, but it's definitely worth looking at. The last option we use is Predict Wind. I really like the visuals of Predict Wind, just as a general kind of longer term outlook. You can scroll through and you can kind of see the waves of wind as they come in. It's nice to be able to just kind of take a peek at that. And if you see a big old gust into the 40s a few days out, you can kind of start planning for that a little bit. I just personally like the visual of it. It is a subscription service. It does cost a decent chunk of money, but we do use it for offshore planning a lot. So we're big Predict Wind fans, but for the ICW, definitely not necessary. I just personally like the visual of it. You can get something similar in Windy. It's just not quite as
fancy.
It's not quite as clean cut. Which,
not as pretty.
Yeah, you can't scroll through and watch the wind. Oh, look at that front come through. Which leads me to planning. Now, we've said this before in a different video, but we typically don't plan more than 3 days out. I'm always looking at the long-term forecast just to kind of say, oh, crap, it looks like we are going to have a gale in 5 days. How does that affect our general idea of what our week's going to look like? But we don't actually plan anchorages or stops or departure times, any of that stuff, more than 2 to 3 days out at any time. Typically, we finish a day, we look at the next day, and then we move to the next day and the next day and the next day. That kind of thing.
Take things one day at a time.
One day at a time. You will make yourself crazy if you are trying to plan 5, 6, 7, or your whole trip at once. Sometimes people put themselves on schedules. We personally just did it on our way south this time. I do not in any way, shape, or form recommend it. We usually don't do our reservations for marinas more than 3 days out. The other thing about planning is that you are probably going to overestimate how many miles you can do in a day when you start out. If you've never done the ICW before, you're going to say, oh, I can cruise at 6 knots and there's 10 hours of daylight. That means I can go 60 nautical miles. Well, there's going to be current against you sometimes. There's going to be current with you sometimes. There's going to be wind against you sometimes that'll slow you down. You're going to have situations where you might be passed like 15 times in a day and you have to slow down every time somebody wants to pass you. Or you're going to have to pass somebody 15 times in a day.
This is particularly important if you have like a high-speed planing vessel. You're like, oh, I can go 20 knots times 10 hours. I can go 200 nautical miles. Not going to happen. There are no wake zones, bridges, other boats. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, we see a lot on the Facebook groups of people being like, can I do 200 miles in a day? And I have a 20, it's the exact same situation. I can go 20 knots. Can I do 200 miles in a day? Ideal circumstances? Yeah, you probably could. Northern North Carolina? Yeah, you probably can. Could you get from Norfolk to Beaufort in a day? Probably. Maybe. I'm not going to say yes because we don't have that kind of vessel, but there's a lot of open water. There's not a lot of no wake zones. Yeah. Could you do that same thing in South Carolina? Probably not. There's a lot of docks. There's a lot of no wake zones. There's a lot of small boats. There's a lot of just general traffic, and that's probably not going to happen. Always underestimate versus overestimate. If you get there a little early, you get there a little early. It's better than arriving in the dark. In our next video, we're going to talk about some of the slightly quirky etiquette rules that apply mainly to the ICW, but are also just good rules in general. Specifically, we're going to talk about the infamous slow pass, some VHF etiquette, and some bridge etiquette. So we will see you next time.